This week's episode of Couch Potatoes Unite! Is sponsored by Found Penny Studio. Found Penny Studio is exclusively fulfilling our Patreon Tier 3 merchandise perk by doing what they do best, creating to celebrate everyday moments like your favorite TV series. Check out Found Penny Studio's creations at foundpennystudio.com and find Couch Potatoes Unite on Patreon at www.patreon.com/couchpotatoesunite.
You say you want to watch a drama. You say you want to watch a comedy. Well, you can watch it with your mama. Or you can watch it with your daddy.
You'll even sit and watch it with your middle schooler. So you can come and talk around a water cooler. We're watching all day and all night.
Couch Potatoes Unite.
Whoa, whoa.
Couch Potatoes Unite.
Whoa, whoa. Couch Potatoes Unite.
Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the podcast entitled Couch Potatoes Unite! Which is based on a blog of the same name because we think we don't have the voices of songbirds slowly drowning in tar. That's why we're so keen on podcasting, or one of the many reasons. That is a quote, by the way. I'm the blogger in question and the South-style Chief Couch Potato. My name is Kylie and I love TV. If you feel the same, keep listening and or checking out our website, couchpotatoesunite.wordpress.com, as you're bound to find some common ground or something you like. For Couch Potatoes Unite, we're all about the wonders and unique long-form storytelling of the small screen. CPU, ! Hopes you've been following releases of brand new episodes of the podcast on Wednesdays, as well as new blog entries on some Tuesdays. And as always, we have several more new episodes on the way. Because the panelists and I live live behind our podcast, the episodes are published once per week. Subscribe to our website or the podcast via iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, via Google Play, Spotify, and now on iHeartRadio and CastBox to stay on top of brand new episodes. Episodes already published discuss a variety of shows around the water cooler, including, but not limited to, Supernatural, Orange is the New Black, Gotham, the Marvel shows on Netflix, Stranger Things, iZombie, The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, The Good Place, and The Crown. We've published several episodes in our Looking Back series covering such diverse shows as Freaks and Geeks, Star Trek, including the original series, the animated series, and The Next Generation, Reign, Friends, and Sense8. Plus, new episodes are in the works, including revisits for Altered Carbon, Doctor Who, Schitt's Creek, Westworld, Fuller House, Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, Will and Grace. We'll be launching new panels covering The Orville, Big Little Lies, and The Good Doctor. And because we look back at shows now past, we'll travel through time and experience all sorts of identities with Quantum Leap, and we'll thank the Golden Girls for being friends. By the way, did you know that CPU also from time to time goes live? We've been live from bunkers, comedy shows, Comic-Cons, and game stores. Plus, we're planning more live appearances and other cool stuff. It's true, and including in these semi-quarantine times. So make sure you like or follow us at our Facebook page, our Twitter at CPU Podcast, our Instagram at Couch Potatoes Unite, or subscribe to our website, our YouTube channel, our Apple iTunes channel, our Stitcher Radio channel, or find us on Google Play, on Spotify, and on iHeartRadio and CastBox. In the meantime, if you don't hear a show in this podcast format, fellow panelists and I still write reviews, and we always seek new panelists. So if you have any interest in joining the discussion, say hello by finding us at any of those outlets I've mentioned. At the very least, stop by and leave us a thumbs up, comment, or review. We like feedback, just don't break our cheeks like Hot Lips Houlihan constantly threatens. We like our cheeks. Go ahead and ask us which cheeks. Today's panel is continuing a new Looking Back series of one of the most requested panels that our humble little podcast has ever embarked upon, having been solicited by both potential panelists and potential listeners alike. It's one of our all-time favorite shows, a show we all love dearly and hold very close to our TV-loving hearts. If you aren't already aware, from time to time, CPU will be choosing shows of all types, but usually of some fame or notoriety to reminisce about and to consider whether or not they age gracefully, like an eager company clerk aiming to please, or don't hold up as well, like Major Charles Winchester III at the Democrat National Convention. As such, this is another chapter of our Looking Back podcast episodes where we review a show that has been gone, either via natural end or cancellation, for some time. And today, that show is MASH. In fact, today is the second of 3 episode discussions in which we'll be looking back at one of the most popular sitcoms of all time, which in turn became one of the most popularly requested panels on CPU. Today, in the second episode of our series, we'll be discussing seasons 4 through 7, covering the departures of Henry Blake and Trapper John McIntyre, and eventually Frank Burns and Walter Radar O'Reilly, and the arrivals of Colonel Sherman Potter, Captain B.J. Honeycutt, and Major Charles Winchester III. In part 3, we'll talk seasons 8 through 11, and we've already discussed seasons 1 through 3 in part 1. As we continue this new ongoing panel, if you're not already aware, you should know that from time to time, your chief couch potato and main moderator, that's me, needs a break, particularly when I think others are more passionate about the show we're discussing in the moment. Case in point, today's episode, I'm not here to moderate. Rather, frequent panelist Nick returns to the moderating microphone for this series and is rejoined by panelists Sarah, Jen, Michael, Josh, Mary, and me, kicking back as a panelist myself. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome back Nick to the moderating microphone. Take it away, Nick.
Thanks, Kylie. Nick here. I'm obsessed with MASH, and that's why I'm moderating. Since we've already gotten to know each other a little bit in part 1 of the MASH 3-part series, why don't we dive in and introduce ourselves and rate how well we liked seasons 4 through 7. Is everybody ready?
Yes.
Oh, excellent.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
All right,
so I'm going to read the character descriptions. There's some new ones, some slightly tweaked, and some returners, because that's how the cast is going to happen. So first, are you obsessed with this show, finding it to be a much-needed escape from the chaos of the outside world, like Hawkeye's obsession with his still and the martinis they produce? Do you like the show, but you don't mind skipping an episode in order to either write a letter to or reread a letter from your spouse, like the always faithful BJ Honeycutt? You find the show to be a delightful diversion from your daily prayer and boxing, and it is full of jocularity, like Father Francis Mulcahy. You think the show is fine, but you know it's for much younger generations. In fact, you'd rather curl up in bed with a Zane Grey, like Colonel Sherman T. Potter. You don't mind the show. It's starting to grow on you, but you have more important things going on, like your engagement or wedding and being head nurse, like Margaret Hot Lips Houlihan. The show is good, but you think its formulaic nature has you sing the punchline coming from a mile away. In fact, you're going to be on the phone for the episodes you do watch, and you will not be finishing the rest of the series, like Walter Radar O'Reilly. This show is crazy. You shouldn't even be watching it. You should be back in Toledo enjoying a Paco's hot dog. In fact, you think the creative team should have been given a Section 8, like Corporal Maxwell Q. Klinger. The show doesn't interest you. Television is for uncultured cretins. You would much rather listen to Bach while enjoying cognac, like Charles Emerson Winchester III? Or finally, do you feel like this show is full of communist degenerates? Does it fill you with the rage from your patriotic army boots all the way up to your squinty little ferret face like Major Frank Burns? Who wants to go first? Remember, introduce yourself and then how you would rate seasons 4 through 7.
Hi, I'm Sarah.
Hi, Sarah.
It's great to be here. I'm married to Nick. We're married.
That's the name.
That's how he knew, because I'm right next to him, because we live together.
That bodes well for your marriage.
Yeah. Almost 10 years, guys. Almost 10 years in August.
Wow, not bad.
Crazy, right?
Almost as long as MASH was on the air.
Almost as long as MASH was on the air. We're not quite there yet. So I am BJ Honeycutt, because I like the show, but if I missed an episode, I'm okay.
There were a lot of episodes.
There were a lot.
Thanks, Sarah. Welcome back.
It's great to be here.
Hey, I'm Josh.
Hi, Josh.
Hey, Josh.
Hey, everyone. I'm not married to Nick or any of you, but I'm glad to be here. And I think I've decided to notch myself down to a Francis Father Mulcahy. Last time I was in the BJ Honeycutt Trapper John spot, adulterous like many of you. I think just the weight of tucking away, I think we're at like 150 episodes. It's kind of tempered some of my early enthusiasm, but I don't think that's because these seasons are worse. I think it's just more my view of them.
That makes sense. And I kind of figured once I took the adultery out of that description, you would drop out of it too.
Yay. Wow.
I mean, welcome back. It's great to have you here, Josh.
Thank you, Nick.
I'm Mary. I'm
Hi,
also
Mary.
not married to Nick.
But your name is Mary.
Seemed like the theme we were going with tonight.
It's true.
I think I'm also sliding down one scale now that you added Father Mulcahy as an option. There's been a lot of like background MASH watching over the last few weeks where like it's on while I'm doing other things and it's enjoyable, and like when I pay attention I don't regret it, but sometimes like 3 or 4 episodes have gone by and I'm like, where am I now? So
It's starting to wear on like the war went on.
It's a lot of TV, and I've started paying attention to like timelines, which make no sense, and I just need to stop that.
All right. Well, thank you, Mary.
Good strategy.
I'm Michael.
Hi, Michael.
Hi, I have a confession to make, and this is directed towards Sarah. I think I might be married to Nick.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, I think it was like a backseat sort of secret marriage, and it didn't last very long, sort of a la Major Houlihan. So I hope you're okay with that.
So you're divorced or you're still married to him?
Well, it's one of those weird situations where I'm not sure where it is anymore. Anyway, so yeah, just on you to know that. Anyway, what do I think of this show? Well, I'm surprised. I was really worried because I was going to say exactly the same thing that Josh and Mary have said, where as we are getting to watch the show more and more, it's becoming, I don't know if this is a bingeable show. I think it works on a week-to-week, season-by-season basis, the way it used to be back then. But I'm not sure it works if you're watching 10, 20 episodes within a couple day span. And, I'm going to downgrade myself to, I'm still somewhat BJ Honeycutt in the fact that I think it's a great show, and it's not a big deal if I miss an episode, but I think I'm kind of a mix between Honeycutt and Hot Lips in this sense, where it's, it grows on me when it's gone, but I do have other things to worry about, and it's more the sense of the state of the world. And I'm not sure this is the type of show that's really a distraction. It kind of reminds you of things, and it's like, oh yeah, okay, it's okay, yeah. It's not really an escape, It's still funny, and I like the dramatic aspects of the show very much, but it just, the enthusiasm for watching 50-some episodes in a short period of time isn't there. So it's still a great show.
All right, thanks, Michael. What's a backseat marriage?
Good question, yes. That's my terrible improv skills where I can't come up with a word or phrase fast enough, so my mouth just says the first thing that comes out, and it never comes out coherently.
But did you notice my awesome improv skills where I yes-anded you right through that? Yes, thank you. That is a definitely thank you.
It's like a shotgun wedding, but it's shotgun improv.
Yeah, the person who's really an improver, well, I guess Josh is as well, but...
He is?
Well,
yes, and!
Oh.
No, I call everyone out in my scenes.
I'm Jen.
Hi, Jen.
Jen.
Hi. Don't worry, Sarah. I'm not married to Nick.
Good.
For my characters, I think last time I might have been a mix, but Trapper, who is now BJ Honeycutt. I would say now I'm Francis Father Mulcahy and then Hot Lips Houlihan, just because, kind of like what Michael said, trying to rewatch through all these episodes in like normal fashion that we're used to with like Netflix and Hulu and the concept of binging. This isn't really a bingeable show to try and watch all the episodes in like that short amount of time. I think it's better spread out. But also for right now, for me, I'm in the middle of moving, so I worry about like packing, setting up utilities, all that lovely stuff that comes with moving, and trying to do that while also trying to catch up on MASH has been a little hard.
Are you bugging out?
I'm getting close to. I'm bugging out in Illinois.
All right, well, thanks, Jen. Welcome back. Kylie, you're next.
I know, because I know. So I'm Kylie, as I mentioned in the intro, participating as a panelist today. I do not remember what I was last time. Sorry, I just don't. But I do think that I am BJ Honeycutt this time. These are my favorite seasons. I agree that MASH is not your typical bingeable show. It's formula sitcom from the 70s, and even though its formula is more lofty than others' formula, it's still the same pattern episode after episode. However, in the character shuffle, with the oncoming of Colonel Potter, who I simply love Harry Morgan. I think he's an excellent addition to this show. And when I think of MASH, I think of him along with Hawkeye and Klinger and everybody else. And even with Charles Winchester III, I love David Ogden Stiers. He's had a long illustrious television career starting here, and I find him more appealing than Frank Burns, even as a B villain. and things of that nature. But I also don't mind skipping an episode. You don't miss much if you do. It is what it is. It's MASH. There's 11 seasons, but I'm enjoying it, and we'll see what happens when we get over the finish line. But for now, seasons 4 through 7 are where I love to really enjoy the show.
Well, thanks, Kylie.
You're welcome.
Y'all already know I'm Nick, and I am not married to myself.
Oh yeah, I forgot to say something.
I guess.
I was going to say that because Nick is too much like a brother, being married to him would be gross. Continue.
It's gross. Yeah, it's gross.
Anyway, I am going to remain a Hawkeye, especially thinking about these seasons specifically. I enjoy them more than the first 3 seasons, for sure. I enjoy the cast changes. It isn't a bingeable show with it being all in front of you, but I will tell you that when FX ran a marathon and you never knew what episode was going to come on next, I was pretty excited to watch all of those or record them on a VHS tape to rewatch, because I'm right in that age range where the DVDs weren't readily available. All right, so now we all know where we stand for seasons 4 through 7. Let's just start talking in general about these seasons. Anyone can jump in. Anything that you want about these four seasons? Yeah,
4. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Math is hard.
Just the counting bits.
Yeah. For those that didn't see, he was actually numbering or counting with his fingers, da 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 da. Ah, there we go.
Look, manipulatives are a great tool in math.
Yep.
The first thing I wrote down was that it really feels like it kind of became the Hawkeye show, where it felt a little more cast-oriented in those first seasons we watched. It transitioned to there was a lot of plots that seemed to be set up to let's explore the brilliant mind of Hawkeye and how does this affect Hawkeye? What's going on with the war for Hawkeye? And that was just a shift. And in some ways I liked it better than the Trapper John and Hawkeye butting around and being kind of terrible. But you had to kind of buy the myth, the man, the Hawkeye for it to work.
Yeah, I wonder if that's because of the other 2 main characters left. So I wonder if they were doubling down on an anchor, this solid point. Well, or I don't know if Alan Alda's ego had anything to do with it, since he was taking more creative control on the back end as well.
He's listed as an executive producer by this time, and he contributes scripts in these seasons. He's written scripts. He directs a lot of the episodes. I don't think it's a mistake that we find more Hawkeye-centered things. Also, generally speaking, back then, he was the most popular character. I mean, even though it was an ensemble show to start, it did kind of shift into a little bit more of a star vehicle, just historically speaking, because he was the draw on the show as the consistent person that was existent in all 11 seasons, other than Hot Lips and a couple other people. But
he is largely the focus of the final episode, which I know is jumping ahead, but that goes along with the fact that, he does become the central character, even though it is very much an ensemble. I'm pretty sure he wins one or both, several of his Emmys for writing and directing during this section of the show. I can't remember the exact episodes he wins for, but
I do have the list of the awards if you want me to look.
That would be awesome.
Right off the bat, I see 3 awards for acting for him.
Mm-hmm.
Actor in a comedy series. He did get one for writing for the episode called Inga.
Yes, and that is one of my favorite episodes of this section.
Yeah, the rest of them seem like as I scan, looks like they're all for acting. And he only got the one for writing.
He does win one for directing because he's the first person ever to win an Emmy for acting, writing, and directing, and he wins all 3 for this show.
Right here, Dear Sigmund.
Oh, Dear Sigmund. Good eyes.
Did you know he had polio as a child, Alan Alda? Ooh.
I did know that. Mm-hmm.
I just saw that and I thought, wowza.
I was going to say, does he have dementia right now, or?
He has Parkinson's.
Parkinson's, that's it.
Does he really? I didn't hear that. Oh, man.
He has an amazing podcast that I think came up in the first episode of this series called Clear and Vivid. It's all about communication, and he brings on a couple MASH people too, eventually. But he talks.
Yeah, he had a later diagnosis than most people do with the disease, so...
And they caught it early because his wife noticed he stopped swinging his arms as he walked, which is a sign.
Oh.
But anyway, what does other people feel about seasons 4 through 7?
Like I said, these are my favorite seasons, I would say, of the show, generally speaking. I love the addition of Harry Morgan. I think Colonel Potter and his rapport with really every character, to me, feels just more comfortably MASH than Henry Blake ever did, which isn't to say that I don't like him or the actor who played him, whose name escapes me just now, but he consistently makes me laugh, and sometimes more than the other characters. I just really enjoy Potter coming on. I also enjoy the relationship he cultivates with Radar. I love those transition episodes where Radar is missing Colonel Blake for like the first, a lot of season 4 basically, and Colonel Potter takes such great gentle care of Radar in those first few episodes, but also cultivates another sort of father-son aspect, different from what Colonel Blake had, but still something like that with Radar, but also in the way that props him up to be, you know, more, I guess, less of a boy and more of a man, and to say it in the vernacular. I love season 4 quite a bit just because of those adjustments. And I also like the way he deals with Frank. I think he's really funny with all of his clapbacks at Frank. Because
totally.
Yeah, I really liked that Blake was so, goofy's not the right word, but he was like, he was sleeping around and doing some of the other stuff, right?
Right.
And it was hard to take him seriously, I think. I mean, obviously he, was in charge of this command, but he seemed like such a goofball a lot of the time to me. That,
Bumbling. I think that's a good word.
Put stuff over on him, I was like, good. Who cares about him? And that's mean. I'm mean. But I thought that Potter, they did a nice job writing that character to make him, an authentic person, and he had the credentials to be a take charge person, but he was also a caring character as well, and it just was more dimensions to play with than just being the goofy foil that they had to get around all the time.
Plus he said things like horse hockey.
I love his Colonel Potterisms. Everything. My mom, who introduced me to the show, she always has these little ditties or something that she might sing. There's the one, and in fact, I think she gets a lot of them from Potter, because there's the one, I like to, oh crap, how's it go? I like to swim with the bow-legged women and swim between their knees. I mean, I was binging that today, and it's like, well, there it is. My mom does that all the time, and that probably is where she gets it from. Oh, and of course, Sydney, my mom always said, ladies and gentlemen, take my advice, pull down your pants and slide on the ice. So that's not a Potterism, but I like those types of lines in the show.
I think one of the advantages of it sort of shifting to a little more Hawkeye centered is it does start to be more about characters. So we do get the Dear Sigmund episode that's focused on Sydney's inner monologue and his mental health and how he's dealing with that, and you get to start to see the characters as people instead of just foils for Hawkeye and Trapper's jokes. So they become people with backstories and crises different kinds and families at home and all those things that I think makes the show a little bit more enjoyable, because even though Dear Sigmund is just another Dear Dad episode, it's about a completely different person. It's that completely different point of view. So it adds some flavor to it 4 seasons in.
I also like the fact that these seasons take on, so this is where the show shifts from more of a straightforward comedy to more of a drama comedy. And I like that shift in tone. I know they were trying to satirize the Vietnam War in the first few seasons and also trying to mimic the style of the movie in the first few seasons. I like that the show takes on this different tone and this second third that kind of gives it its own stamp, and I think that's, from a legacy standpoint, that's what people remember about the show more than the actual straightforward comedic stuff.
Yeah, this is definitely the tone that when when we decided to do this and I was thinking back on my memories of MASH, this is the tone that I recall. And watching those first seasons, I just remember being like, ugh, this makes me feel like bummed out, and it's also dire. Whereas although it's still terrible things happening, this is more like easy for me to consume and nostalgic, as opposed to just being kind of irksome at times. Still death and people are depressed and it's a war.
I think I remember these seasons more just because at least when I had cable and I was watching in syndication on TV Land, like these are usually the seasons that I seem to remember the most. I don't know, maybe it's just where the timing I was at when I used to watch it growing up, but these were the most memorable ones. I think I remember also, like, when I was rewatching it, there was one episode where Klinger, like, climbs up to the top of a pole to wait out to see until he gets to Section 8. Like, I still remember that from, like, back when I was still, like, a teenager.
Yeah, I remember being surprised. I'm not sure how old I was when my parents told me that, like, no, Blake and Trapper are the original cast, because when it was in syndication, it didn't show you episodes in any kind of order, and by sheer number and random chance, there's more with Potter. There's definitely more with Potter than Blake. And
Oh, yeah.
but even like Winchester, I remember it kind of confusing me when I was younger. Like, wait, now Potter and Frank are in this one, but Trapper isn't. So that always kind of confused me, and it didn't. I would always get annoyed when seasons 1 through 3 would come on, because they weren't the show that I really liked. That's how big of a shift it is. It's probably more subtle now, but when I was first watching it.
And I think it's different too when we were talking about watching it in syndication or like watching it when it did premiere week after week. It's a lot different than binging it, because I think what I kind of noticed after binging it, moving right on from season 3 to season 4, I kind of wish there was more of a, I mean, obviously I understand that that's how TV shows sometimes work. There's not always closure, but I wish there was some other like formal closure for Trapper leaving than what was done between seasons 3 and 4. I mean, Henry Blake did know a little sooner for when he was going to leave the show, but I don't think Trapper did until after he filmed the finale, and they didn't really get a chance to do more of like a goodbye story for him.
All of the transitions in casting felt really practical and artless. It seems like every time it's like a phone call, like, what's that? Somebody's contract's up? Well, send in another actor. And that's what you get. And then now these are the people you watch.
Well, to be fair, Trapper John, whatever his name was, he left of his own accord. There was just no contract. He was like, I'm not getting enough of a role because everybody likes Hawkeye, so I'm peacing out. He didn't even go to the spin-off.
Wayne Rogers was that
Wayne
actor.
Rogers, that's right. Whereas McLean Stevenson,
Yep. Mm-hmm.
he also voluntarily left but gave the show notice, so they actually gave him a send-off. He does have he's the only one that has a transition. So
it doesn't come up. It'll come up, I guess, probably next episode. But Radar does get a transition.
He does too, yeah.
When Gary Berghoff leaves.
But even when they tamped down his appearances, it really just feels like, oh, did I just watch 4 episodes and he wasn't there and they didn't really address it? Oh, now I guess he's in these episodes, and it's just because that's what they decided to do.
He was wanting to leave.
He wasn't happy anymore. He was done.
Yeah.
He was like 73 years old playing a 16-year-old.
Where are we going?
That's an exaggeration.
But I do feel like, and I think I mentioned this before, but like Radar's character in this chunk gets dumbed down. So in the first chunk, the first third, he's smoking cigars and playing poker, and they're loading up, the skin flicks that Henry Blake ordered from Tokyo. And then all of a sudden in like seasons 4 and 5, like he's never had a cigar before, and he just becomes this like, oh, he had a fiance. Like he gets a Dear John recording in the first third, and all of a sudden he's this like bumbling guy who's never seen a woman or talked to a woman, and he's never done anything. He doesn't have any life experience. So I could see where that gets kind of wearing, where you just have to be like the town rube, and you don't get to like mature at all, even though you're in this situation where people are teaching you all sorts of fun new vices.
Especially since he was...
The Radar character version in the first seasons was a carryover of what was in the movie and the books, and that
Correct.
he had input into trying to like develop this more like wholesome, wide-eyed character. Although ultimately the result was the same, which was that he wanted out and he just didn't make as many appearances.
No, I think you're absolutely right. He's the only actor that transitioned from the movie to the TV show, and I think the first 3 seasons mirror the Radar in the movie, from my recollection of the movie, whereas the Radar in these middle seasons does take on a much more innocent-like quality, and even that mentorship relationship between Potter and Radar that I mentioned previously has, I don't want to say Potter's patronizing because that's not the right word, he's gentle about it, but it's more of a, I know way more than you kind of a thing, as opposed to I'm just protecting you and making sure you're doing okay like Blake did.
Yeah, I feel like we can chalk up a lot of the dumbing down, quote unquote, of Radar's character. I feel like that's just a old time, and I hate to say old time for something that's only about 40, 50 years old, but, like this era of television sitcoms would devolve. They wouldn't necessarily evolve over time. Nowadays, a show characters will change from, the beginning to the end and become like completely different, changed characters with story arcs. But like in this era, the 1970s, a TV sitcom, you would fall into a niche in that character because the audience was just like, hey, let's tune in and find out what's happening with the gang this week. So there was less incentive, not even an incentive because people didn't even think about it at the time. It was just like, this is what you do. You play this character and this character has quirks. And you play those quirks. And that could get boring if you play it for 8 seasons plus a movie.
I am reading this, and granted, things on the internet might not be true, but I have heard this before, that he didn't get along with the rest of the cast very well.
I remember you said that, last episode.
Yeah, I remember that from last time.
Maybe his character didn't get great development because the actor was up to some antics behind the scenes, but that could also be fake. Who knows?
What kind of antics?
So according to the interwebs, Gary Bergdorf would come, he would skip rehearsal, or he would come to set a couple hours late, or he wouldn't show up at all. But he was complaining that his character was just the same and wasn't getting any development, and he wanted more screen time. But then when they would write those things in, he wouldn't show up that day. So they would have to scramble to rewrite. And so it was just the same for him.
I always wondered why sure I looked it up at one point, but I always wondered why it was that, who didn't want him to leave? Because he kept doing, one episode every 3 to 4 episodes, and sometimes they were him standing at a phone, clearly not on the same set as everyone else because he went back home to help Mom. Who's
his mom? According to this, which is IMDb, he was done in season 7, but agreed to come back in season 8 to do a 2-parter to say goodbye. So maybe they were stretching out footage that they had, or maybe he had filmed, I don't know. Maybe they weren't filming everything in episode sequentially. I don't know.
They probably weren't, yeah.
That Klinger's calling him for help, and he's back in the States.
His official, answer is that he was just burned out and wanted to spend time with his family. So, I mean, showing up late and just sort of, that to me goes along with burnout. You're exhausted and you can't make yourself do it anymore.
Yeah. And unfortunately, he didn't really have a lot of commercial success after this. But I think that's the trap that a lot of people kind of fall into is they leave because they're tired or they're burned out or they just want to do something different and hoping that something else will come along. And it seems like maybe it didn't work out so well. But
you got that spinoff, and I think it's known as ever the best, most successful spinoff. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know what it did. Not well at all.
No.
None of the MASH spinoffs did well. We'll talk about that in the next part, though.
Yeah.
So we talked about Blake a little bit, or the Potter for Blake, that change. I just wanted to add back a while that I think one of the reasons Potter works better than Blake, kind of going off what Sarah was saying, how Blake was like, how is this even working? This is supposed to be a hospital at a war, and he's inept. And I think Potter gives it the more believability that they're the best MASH unit. Their survival rate is so good because you have somebody who knows how the army works, tries to work it well, and is also a doctor, that balance. I do feel like they spend a lot of time, the characters are like, oh, but he's regular army. They were so nervous about him being regular army before he came in. And then, he was fine.
He's kind of like a Captain Picard type leader. He engenders the leadership, the warmth and leadership of the other people of the MASH unit. He knows how to lead them well, but also can relate to them in some small ways. So he's able to engender a feeling of loyalty, and I will go with you no matter what you do. And I don't know if that's Harry Morgan's acting that he brought to that, or if that was the way the character was written. I don't know, but I like the Henry Blake character. It's a funny character, a good goofball character. I like McLean Stevenson as an actor of that character, but I definitely am way more of a fan of Harry Morgan's Colonel Potter. I think it's just a better written character and not as a stereotype character.
So why don't we use that to pivot into talking about the other cast changes? Because one of the things that, instead of saying it for each cast change, I think the change from the first 3 seasons to this, including these other characters, especially even Winchester coming later, they're all a little bit more three-dimensional than the people they replaced. We talked about Potter instead of Blake, but how do we feel about BJ instead of Trapper?
I like BJ a lot. I actually was going to bring him up quite separately. I like the rapport and the chemistry that Mike Farrell had with Alan Alda. It didn't feel quite so snarky, which there was almost an underlying tension, I think, between Alda and whatever his name was, I forgot.
Wayne Rogers.
Wayne Rogers. That seemed to play out on screen, whereas Mike Farrell and Alan Alda had more of an easygoing, I think, relationship in real life that played out on screen. I also like the fact that BJ is quite a contrast from Trapper. He's not really similar to Trapper at all, and so it makes you feel like that is a genuine switch. Oh, Trapper got sent home, it's made a mention of, but here's this random captain that comes in and substitutes for him. That's what happens in the military. So that felt real and genuine to me, along with a real and genuine character. Also, I wanted to add, if Potter is Captain Picard, does that make Blake Captain Kirk?
Oh, well. Huh.
Just trying to track the analogy, Nick.
I would say he's more Robert April. Sorry, bad.
I don't get that reference.
Well,
Same.
Robert April was, never mind.
Yeah, you don't have to.
Podcast episode.
Michael stumped the panel.
I really like, I'm going to steer us back. I really like the writing of Trapper just being gone. Because at first it seems really lazy. Like, okay, come on, guys. You couldn't think of anything. Like, he's just gone when Alan Alda, what is his name? Hawkeye gets back from Japan or wherever he went. He's just gone. That's lazy. But I like how it set up the end of the series. I mean, that was always in his mind. And at the end, BJ didn't want to do that to Hawkeye because of that.
He didn't even say goodbye.
Yeah. And so I think that worked out. That was a little 8-season payoff there that they really worked in. And it also kind of made BJ instantly sympathetic because BJ arrives and Hawkeye's like, all right, come on, hijinks, let's go. And BJ's like, okay. I like that. That just set up his character so nicely. Like, he's a nice guy with a nice wife who he does not cheat on, a baby daughter at home, but yet he's here and he's down. He's going to hang.
One of the things that I liked about the change is that Trapper wasn't that much different from Hawkeye. The difference was got drunk a lot and they both ran around with nurses. So it's not just like, oh, I prefer BJ because he's not an adulterer, but like he has a different personality more separate from Hawkeye too, which gives the cast a little bit more, it's more well-rounded.
He changed the tenor of the hijinks. So to me, Trapper and Hawkeye were mean a lot. A lot of the pranks they pulled on Frank were really kind of nasty. Yeah. And when BJ comes, they become like a little more lighthearted. I mean, you get that whole sort of like subplot where BJ is like the camp prankster, but they're all like pretty innocent, fun things. They're not so mean-spirited, and they're not all focused on Frank. So I think it just adds some variety to that idea of them being sort of the brains of the operation.
Well, and I think the barometer is Hot Lips, because she can't stand Hawkeye or Trapper or the combination of the two of them, and is actually quite shrill in those first 3 seasons. But when BJ comes aboard and it's Hawkeye and BJ doing their sort of hijinks and shenanigans, even though I just love the lines where she's like, and they'll do this and they'll do this and they'll do this, but I'm honored to serve with them. They're great doctors. They're good men. I think it's reflected in the characters around them. And one of the episodes that kind of resonates with me is the one where BJ actually contemplates adultery, where he's got the attraction to that, I don't think she's a nurse, the other woman, and ends up feeling very, very guilty about that. And to me, I think they did that deliberately to set him up so that he would, just to be clear, audience, this is not Trapper. This is somebody totally different. And it's a device that made it work, and I think it gave the show longevity, because if people started dropping like flies, as it seemed to be, they wouldn't have lasted as long as they did.
Yeah, to touch off that, the Margaret-Frank relationship, I feel like that didn't transition as well from the movie as they would have hoped, as they delved more into Margaret. And if she's a good nurse and a good head nurse, it just doesn't make sense that she's with Frank, because he's a bad doctor.
Right.
That's why the Franks were more mean-spirited, amongst other reasons, but like he would just give up on patients, and patients were more likely to die if they had Frank. Whereas that shift to Winchester, at least Winchester's a good doctor.
Yeah.
Frank is a whiny, sniveling, cowardly, icky guy.
A weasel. He's a weasel.
Yeah.
They actually call him that.
And
they call him Ferretface.
Ferret, that's it, yeah.
And Charles, despite Charles being the precursor to Fraser Crane, he reminds me very much of Fraser Crane in the Army. He has moments of genuine humanity that you see when he comes aboard, and that is established fairly early on. So
He's Cogsworth, you guys.
He's also Cogsworth, yes.
I'm too good for this, and then in the end, we'll be human again.
And Lwaxana Troy's love interest at one point on Star Trek The Next Generation to continue.
Very
this
true.
thing.
He's also a Disney villain and a Disney's villain sidekick. Anyone know what movie?
I do, but
Oh, shoot. Well, he's in the Hunchback of Notre Dame as the one.
The Archbishop of...
Yeah.
And
he's in Pocahontas.
He's the villain and the villain's sidekick.
Oh, that's right. Mm-hmm.
Oh, he does both voices? Huh.
And he's in Lilo and Stitch and Atlantis. He's a Disney guy.
He's also a real life conductor. Like, he conducted the Boston Pops and I think maybe the Portland Symphony at different times. So he was a serious musician and really studied that, and so was served as a guest conductor at different points.
That's amazing.
I actually love David Ogdenstiers on this show. I mean, I think, honestly, Winchester is one of my favorite characters. I love his arc. I love the way he's become, he's meant to be that quote-unquote villain character, the foil to BJ and Hawkeye, but there is such great humanity in various episodes that he brings out, and the way I can't remember if there's one particular episode. Oh crap! Now I can't remember, but there's one particular moment where he has this empathy and warmth that is very different and I can't remember it for the life of me, unfortunately. So just go ahead and cut this part out.
Is it in season 8 when he gets the chocolate to the local villager children?
It might be. Yeah, that sounds about right now. So it's not even this one.
I also like the episode where he gets the music for the man whose hand is damaged.
Yes, that one. Oh my goodness, I love that episode.
His relationship with his sister. Obviously, we never meet his sister. We do hear her, but again, this character is better developed and better written than Frank Burns was written.
Well, and right off the bat in his first episode, it's established that he is not only a good doctor, he's an excellent doctor. He's better than Hawkeye, maybe just by virtue of the fact that he's only recently come from the States. So he's had the benefit of additional training on new techniques, but he comes in and he does that I just watched it. He repairs an aneurysm, and before he showed up, they were sure they were going to lose the patient, and he's like, I've done dozens of them.
Right.
Let me show you. You know, he's an ass about it, but he saves the patient, and he doesn't let his ego get in the way of doing that, even though he's clearly off on the wrong foot with everyone. He's focused on the patient, where Frank would have been throwing a temper tantrum and probably killed the guy.
Yeah.
Does one thing at a time. He does it very well, and then he moves on.
Yes.
I do like that balance of he's a better surgeon technically, but not necessarily. He's a fish out of water here. He can't spend the time he needs to because 4 other people will die if he saves a leg instead of just saving the life and moving on to save other lives. Like, there is that good balance.
It's a good tension.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure they have it over several episodes, but the very first episode, like Mary was describing, there's that whole argument about meatball surgery versus, what he's doing in the States. And that's I think that's also a very real tension that happened in the military. You draft all of these people that have specific skill sets, but Hawkeye and BJ by that time are seasoned veterans at this point, and they've kind of had to throw out what they knew to be able to make what they're doing work, whereas Charles is so set in his ways that the adjustment's more difficult for him.
I think Charles had to learn more about humanity in order to be even better, and that's something that the other doctors were able to share with him was, relating to the people. And, Charles was a rich guy, and a lot of the people were very poor, and that's something that was brought up again and again, was how he could relate to these people. How did he get here? I mean, he was pretty surprised to find himself where he was.
Because he was what card game were they playing? I haven't rewatched this as recently as I think some of you have.
Not poker. Was it poker?
Bridge.
Was he playing cribbage?
Was
it
bridge.
cribbage?
Was it cribbage?
No, it was bridge.
Bridge. It was bridge. I thought you said
it was Quidditch.
It was Quidditch. They were playing Quidditch? Were they?
Cribbage.
Potter
I
was
don't
playing?
even think
No?
J.K. Rowling was barely born, but okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's like way before Harry Potter time.
Right.
Wasn't he playing cribbage with the doctor or with the commanding officer in Tokyo? Because it was just the 2 of them.
It was just the 2. Don't you need more than 2 for bridge?
Because there is an episode about bridge.
There is.
But bridge is 4 people.
Okay. Are you referring to the 2-person game, Nick?
Yeah, because that's why he's there.
Yeah, because
somebody owed him $674 or whatever the number.
and 11 cents. I mean, he was so pedantic about it.
Off
There's
of
a-
cribbage? We need to double check this, because I've never played cribbage for money. Now, maybe there's a way.
Or was it like gin?
Penny a point, quarter a point, dollar a point. You
That
can gamble
seems-
on anything, Kylie.
Okay, but that's like the most expensive game. I'm not giving anybody $121. So.
Well, no, it's the difference.
Oh. Nick just made a thing.
Cribbage. Beating him at cribbage
I
for
kind of thought they had-
672.
Yeah.
See? We're playing wrong.
Yeah, I'm going to have to send you to the Korean War.
Oh my gosh. You would be there so fast. It's not even funny.
No,
Okay, I feel like the 2 of you need to briefly mention what you're talking about here, because
So my husband and I play we've been lax lately because,
it was more of a quarantine thing.
but for a while when we were in like true lockdown, we played one game of cribbage every night. And
Sarah's winning more than me.
yeah, but I was raised
Which is
playing.
why I'm sending you to the front.
That's right. I'm going to the front. But I should point out, I've played since I was like 9 or 10. Nick didn't start till college, so I've got some time in on him. He's getting pretty good.
I also let her win. Anyway, so the other cast change is Mulcahy and Klinger are now series regulars through the course of seasons 4 through 7. How do we feel about that?
Great, because I love both of them.
Yeah,
Agreed.
I'm glad they got promoted.
Yeah.
So a lot of the Klinger material seems to be like taking over stuff that they would have given Radar,
Yeah.
which, I mean, I like the Klinger character a lot, so I was very happy to watch all that. Just at first it felt clunky because it was like, they used to give everything that these other 5 people didn't do to Radar, and now he's not here, and they're giving it to the character whose whole bit was addressed for a while. But I mean, it worked.
He went from one note to a little bit more than one note.
Right. It's almost weird. Like sometimes he's not doing the dress bit, so then they like expand the like I'm going for Section 8 bit. But other times he just like is working at the camp, and he's one of the people that people talk to, or he has just some regular concern. Like they let him do things in addition to he's on the dress or the I'm crazy shtick.
One of the things I like about Klinger is he's always, like, when it's time to work, he's always focused on the work. So he gets these, like, kind of great little bits because of that. So one of my favorites is the guy who they have to shave his mustache off. And so Klinger makes him a new mustache, like, out of his hair that he can, like, put on. And it's so ridiculous, but, like, it's so patient-focused. Like, and maybe not something you would think about somebody who's so just wants to get out and is clearly doing whatever gimmick he can latch onto to get out, but takes this moment to, like, see this guy's clear suffering and then come up with this absolutely ridiculous solution to make him happy.
I also find it interesting that it was probably more practical of we're sick of doing the dress bit, but the audience wants to see it, so we'll make him have a scarf on sometimes, but like he transitions out of it, like he's having an allergy from the uniform, and it turns out he just needs to wear a slip underneath, or just little things like that.
It doesn't bother me because it's an evolution for Klinger's character, right? He goes from Section 8 wanting to, I still want to leave the army, but at least I'm in this position and I've got a bunch of friends. And remember, this is also the time when his wife leaves him, so he decides he's going to devote himself more to the army than he previously intended. I like that dynamic and that shift because he's able to Jamie Farr is able to play off the other actors again in different ways, and it gives him more dimension. I also like the fact that Father Mulcahy is made a regular. I would say he's goofy. I mean, he's not your typical camp clergyman, and William Christopher just plays him so pure but wry, and I've always loved his character, but when he becomes more of a regular facet of the show, it's such a great counterbalance to all of the other cast of characters.
Mulcahy seems to have a little delight in getting his ribbon also. He notices everyone's, we're wrapping up and everyone's doing their jokes, and he has here's his nickel to throw in the pot also, and it's a delight.
And I don't remember which season it is, but I'm pretty sure it's one of these seasons. I love the episode where he commits to learning about and ministering to faiths other than Catholicism because he takes his role so seriously. I'm not so good with episode names on this show. They do not sit in my brain. But I remember that episode very well. Yeah, I remember that episode a lot because I enjoy him so much, and he's able to shine in that.
It comes up a couple times, like if somebody's Jewish or he does multiple different, at least Christianity services on a regular basis, whether there's anyone in attendance or not, he still does them. Mm-hmm. So yeah, he was always one of my favorite characters growing up too, and I couldn't even tell you why. I just enjoyed him, and Hawkeye were my favorite.
I always liked him and Klinger. I don't know why. I like kind of the side characters. I like to see what's going on with them, and I liked Klinger's journey. He just says, I'm not going to wear the dress anymore because you didn't believe me when I told you my wife was really leaving me, so I'm not going to do any of this anymore because you can't take me seriously. And I don't know. He's got a pretty strong arc there, and I always liked him a lot.
You really get to know a lot about Toledo through him. Toledo.
Yeah.
And we're all based in Michigan, so you think we know a little. It's right next to us.
No, we're based in Michigan, so that's why we don't, because we don't give a... No, never mind.
Careful! Hi, I might edit that. Hi, Ohio listeners. Jeez.
I don't know where... I'm ignorant, and I'm not quite sure. Is Toledo really close to the edge of Michigan?
Yeah.
We almost had Toledo. We almost actually owned it.
I thought that was Port Huron.
No. We almost had Toledo. There's a whole war. There was a war, quote unquote, that Michigan and Ohio had, the Toledo War.
It's right over the Michigan-Ohio border south of Detroit. It's very close.
Good to know. I mean...
And we're back. No.
I don't played anything MASH related.
It's okay, Nick. We'll help you.
I always liked Father Mulcahy, but I'm not sure for me if it's... I like the character, but I also... So William Christopher had a son who was autistic at the very beginning of sort of understanding what that means. He and his wife wrote a book about it. And so I remember reading that as a teenager. Just the way that they fought for their son who had this great difference that nobody really understood, and the lengths that they went to like get him help and sort of gain understanding, like, is sort of married in my mind with this really like gentle character that he also played. And I don't think he appreciated that connection, because I don't think I'm the only one who made that, but to me those two things are married. Like, this show gave him the resources so that he could get his son help that wouldn't be available to the average family, because he was, working as an actor.
Yeah.
The book is called Mixed Blessings, and everyone should check that out. I know I'm going to. And that is not insincere. That sounds fascinating to me, and I would love to read that.
All right.
I will admit that Mulcahy and Klinger are not my favorite characters. I like them, but they're not the ones that I gravitate towards whenever they're on screen. It's like, okay, here's a Klinger moment, here's a Mulcahy moment. I like the moments they have, but for whatever reason, it's just not my main preference. So I think it's wonderful that everyone likes these characters, and I wish I liked them more.
Interesting that we're talking about those two characters together, because William Christopher and Jamie Farr went on tour in the mid-90s in a production of The Odd Couple.
What?
Wow.
Really?
Did they play Oscar and Felix?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, I'm guessing that William Christopher would have been the...
Felix.
I always get the two character
He would be
names mixed
Felix,
up,
the
so I never
neat
know.
one.
Yeah.
And
don't-
Jamie Farr would be Oscar, am I right?
This didn't say I'm scanning.
I think they switched
William
everything.
Chris, they probably did, because you can do
Jamie
that.
Farr
Yeah.
was Oscar, and William Christopher was Felix.
Bing,
Yeah.
bing, 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 bing.
That's the only way they could have done that.
I don't know which one's the curmudgeon.
Oscar.
So
How are
Farr
you
was-
defining curmudgeon? You're supposed to think of neat versus messy.
Which one was the
refined.
messy one?
Oscar.
Okay, so yes, that makes sense.
That's fascinating, and I wish that I had seen that, although I would have been very young at the time.
In the mid-90s?
Well, relatively young. Probably
Yeah.
couldn't afford a ticket with those names in it.
Those names.
Well, I'm just saying. But then I also wanted to say that I like Father Mulcahy and I like Klinger too, but I don't... There are very few characters on MASH that I would rank as ones I don't like. I like all of them, really, except Frank.
And Colonel Flag.
And what?
Colonel Flag. I think he's
Well,
not a regular.
He's not a regular. I don't count him.
Okay, were there any, we've mentioned a few, but were there favorite episodes or least favorite episodes that stood out in these 4 seasons?
I like the episode that shows the filming from like a patient's perspective of what happens.
Called Point of View.
Point of View, it's called. Yes.
A wounded soldier being treated at the 407th provides a narrative through his eyes. Yeah, so you described it.
3-year prompts, you mentioned the interview. That is an episode that sticks in my brain because it was filmed so differently, and that one took on a very serious tone as opposed to some of the usual highlights in comedy. And that one, and also I don't remember what the name of the episode is, but there's one where it's completely silent and it's them in surgery all night.
Is that OR?
Maybe.
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure either. I'll look it up. But that one's also extremely serious. And is that earlier than this? I start to lose things. Anyway, I know that the interview is one because it was just so different from anything they had done before. And I think it kind of was pioneering as well. I think it set up room for other sitcoms to sort of experiment.
For some reason, they colorized that episode. So
On
for
Hulu,
for like
at
a
one
year
time.
on Hulu,
Mhm.
they had a colorized version of it. It's since been put back to the black and white one, but it seemed kind of random. But they still left the part where it was like, this episode has been filmed in black and white, but then the episode was colorized.
Good job, Hulu.
You know, the people that were adding color to it were like, we are geniuses. Why was this never done before?
Apparently, it was a remastering error. When they remastered all of the episodes for Hulu, they just did like a thing. They probably just did like an algorithm to redo it. And then when they realized, like, oh, wait, whoops, there's episodes that need not be in colors, so why don't we do that?
I believe the episode I'm thinking of is Post-Op, which is 24 of season 5.
Yes, that is a good one.
One of my favorite episodes, I like the episode called The Nurses, where basically it's from the point, it basically focuses on the nurses, and it shows, a very different side to Houlihan, where you actually get a meaty multi-layered character in that episode where she's trying to be a leader but also trying to relate to the women that she's serving, and there's that great scene where she just like puts it all out there about how hard it is to be the leader amongst the nurses and how she wants their respect, but she also wants to be liked. She wants to be a good leader, a good mentor, but also needs to have that distance and how hard that is. Also, I think it's really cool that episode was both written and directed by a woman. So I think that's really awesome that in the 1970s, you have a nurse-centric episode that was a definite female voice in a show that was very clearly male-dominated. And I just think that's one of my favorite episodes of this chunk.
Was that the episode where she ends up bunking with the nurses for a little while?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And there's a nurse that wants to spend the night with her husband, but because of the protocol, Houlihan's like, no, you can't do that because that's fraternizing, even though you're married. So they kind of have to go. They kind of have to go under her nose in order to get it.
She's in trouble.
Yeah.
She's out with Houlihan in OR. Houlihan doesn't even know her husband's there. So she sneaks.
Okay, that's it. Okay, so I had some of the details wrong. I had some
bed arrest. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought he was. I thought he was on bed rest too. Oh wait, no, you just said that.
And antagonizing, like they're clearly at loggerheads with each other. That she can't even tell her that it's her husband who's come in unexpectedly.
That episode always stood out in my memory for MASH, and I really enjoyed. There's Margaret episodes, and then there's the ones where she's kind of still with Frank and two-dimensional, and that is one that pulls her forward. That one and the two-parter, Comrades in Arms, with her and Hawkeye briefly become romantically involved while trapped behind enemy lines.
I'm glad you mentioned those as well. Those are two of my favorites just because it's a real time to shine for Alan Alda and for...
Loretta Swit.
Yes, thank you. I don't know why I'm having trouble with all the names today, but I thought their acting was brilliant in those two episodes. And I remember...
Very much so. That's, yeah.
I think she's a great actor. It's just Margaret is not my favorite character, and so I struggle.
Yeah.
Kind of similarly...
That's my hurt.
About the Hawkeye episode where he gets a concussion and he monologues to a Korean family for 30 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
Detest. Skip that episode every time.
Now, why do you hate it? I'm curious.
To me, that episode to me signifies the shift where it becomes all about Hawkeye. Like,
that's where I wrote down, like, oh, I'm watching the Hawkeye show.
It's literally just him talking for 20 minutes.
It seems like one of those one-act plays that they try to make you read in acting class in undergrad, and you're like, WTF is this play?
No, it's like your friend wrote a one-act play, and you have to go watch it.
Ouch.
Yowzas.
They had to do like 27 episodes in a season, so...
There are two scenes from MASH as a whole that are just like burned in my brain. One of them we'll deal with in the next episode we record, but the other one is the radio-guided roadside tracheotomy in Mulcahy's War. Mm-hmm. I don't know why that seemed like the most important thing for my brain to remember about 100 hours of watching MASH. That's like one of two things that are MASH to me.
I agree with you. That scene stands out. And I don't know if it was the drama with how it's done.
Can you take us through it? Just to refresh me a little bit, because it didn't stick in my brain. I know the episode, but I can't remember what happened.
So I guess Radar and Mulcahy go to the front to bring back someone who's wounded. And on the trip, the wounded soldier isn't breathing, so they radio back to the 4077 and they talk him through cutting into the guy's neck and putting a pen or what was it? It was like a pen, like a dropper.
It was a pen.
It was like a pen and an eyedropper. So
yes, it was a pencil. Because Radar like, a pencil work, and they're just like.
I think it was pencil for some reason.
I was going to say, because Father Mulcahy, I think he was talking with someone that was injured, trying to relate to them and essentially use responsibilities as a priest. And the guy was like, you're never going to know how it feels because you've never been to the front. And I think Mulcahy just wanted some experience seeing what it was like just being on the front, even though, I think Potter told him not to go and he still went anyway.
Yeah, but he ends up saving the day by putting a tube in a guy's neck on the back of a Jeep. So what is that?
Well, radar winces and squirms the whole time.
Yep.
I mean, do you think this is the first, like, improvised tracheotomy on TV? Because that's been done quite a bit now.
That's what I thought, but I don't have the background to tell you whether or not that's true.
Well, yeah, what other medical dramas or shows were on prior to MASH?
Well, medical dramas on TV are as old as TV itself. I mean, General Hospital goes back to like the 50s, and there's Marcus Welby, MD. That was a show from the 50s and early 60s. And I mean, so medical dramas, they've been around for ages, but as for how graphic they got, that's a good question, because I want to almost say it wasn't until like the 80s and 90s, although there was kind of a dearth of medical dramas in the 80s. It wasn't until much later that they started to actually show what they, blood and guts and what really, I would probably say it was definitely at that time, mid-70s, probably very rare to see something that graphic.
Mm-hmm. Well, and this has the added pall of war behind it. So
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
This was very different from anything else that had come before. So I do not think there was any... I can't verify this just sitting here talking today, but I'm willing to bet money this is probably the first improvised roadside tracheotomy that television ever witnessed.
And it has been much copied since then. I mean, a lot of shows do it. Yeah. I don't think I could do a tracheotomy, guys, so nobody need one, because I'm not your girl.
Just a few more things to touch on before we wrap up. Margaret has quite the story arc during these seasons. So we've mentioned Margaret, but we didn't really mention that she gets engaged and then married and then divorced all throughout.
All in 4 seasons.
Yeah. It's basically their first attempt at how can we do more with Margaret, and they're like, well, one whole season on her being engaged, one on her marriage, and then one on her divorce.
Which it's funny if you think about it, because, again, this show lasted 11 seasons, but the war itself only lasted like 2 or 3. So if you contract the actual relationship that lasted several years to us, the viewer, down to the real timeline of MASH in real life, if you can do that, which you can't really, but it probably only lasted several months, is what I'm saying.
Maybe not even several.
I mean, you do get the sense of that in the show, too, that she isn't really with him all that long, even though it's been, a whole season. I never had the impression that her relationship with Donald Penobscot lasted all that long.
And they were not together during the amount of time of their engagement and marriage. They weren't in the same geographical location often at all either. But I don't know. Anything else to say about it?
I just remember the episode where she thinks she's pregnant and they have to kill Radar's rabbit to find out. That's mine, Josh. That's like always in my head. Because I remember watching it and I was like, what is this about, Nick? Because I had really never heard that that's how they used to test for pregnancy. I am just living a small life.
Yeah.
They don't kill the rabbit, though. That's the gag. They perform little tiny surgery and remove the rabbit's ovaries.
That's true.
To do the test. I was watching Jen's very horrified face, and I wanted to reassure her that the rabbit does not end up dead.
No, I was going to say, it wasn't horrified. I don't know that much about, I didn't study science, obviously, in college, but it's I don't know how that works with how they, compare it like that. Does anyone want to elaborate?
I think they would take your blood if you thought you were pregnant, and they would inject it in a rabbit, right? And then someone else...
You're asking us.
I don't know.
I'm as ignorant as everyone else, but I assume that the hormones that would be present in a pregnant human would cause a physiological effect in a female rabbit, which they could then detect.
Okay.
I'm literally making that up.
You're pregnant too.
That seems logical based on the fact that they were able to remove the rabbit's reproductive system and run the test.
And then she got to live with Bongo.
I can say Radar's ever evolving menagerie.
Yeah.
Yes.
All I can
We
say
need a
is
rabbit for this hotline.
I just produce a TV podcast. I don't know nothing about rabbit hormones and stuff. But I will say that Margaret's romantic life is actually largely forgettable. What sticks with me about Margaret is her fierce admiration for her father, which comes up periodically throughout the series, and how everything she does is seeking his validation, and part of that is Donald Penobscot and her choice of marrying him and so forth, but I think that's the larger story that the show services better.
Have we expressed dislike for Penobscot and his family? That they were like upper crusty and like, they're boring compared to everyone else in this world, and they're mean to Margaret, and not a funny mean like everyone else is mean to Margaret, and just a regular mean. So maybe it's for the best.
Oh, it definitely was. I don't know how much we see of that character up until towards the end, but I just remember him being a doofus that shouldn't have ended up with Margaret if we like Margaret. Anyway.
Even if you don't like Margaret, you sympathize with Margaret because of this wet blanket.
Yeah. But they do, BJ and Hawkeye do pull a pretty horrible prank on her for her honeymoon.
What did they? I don't remember.
They put Donald in a full body cast.
Oh, that's right.
And then they don't tell her till, they
phone in Japan.
That's right.
Yeah.
I remember now.
Don't they wheel him off on a little hand cart?
Mm-hmm.
That episode to me, though, highlights, clearly that relationship was not long for the world, because the moment Patience came in, Margaret left him at the altar to go help with triage in her wedding dress and ultimately in surgery.
That's more a quirk of the show. Like, every episode has them I've been waiting 6 weeks for these ribs, and I'm just about to take my first bite of the rib. Oh,
Jobbers.
They're incoming. I guess I can't even finish closing my mouth around this rib. I have to run away. Everything is just, as soon as you're aware of it, you have to run away.
Attention, wounded coming. Get over to surgery.
Yeah, but, with Margaret, that's a real thing. They're literally doing their vows, and they have a speed, 15-second wedding. So, okay, the ribs are ribs, but, her wedding.
Not just ribs.
And, previously, in seasons 1 through 3, we see, not that we ever see Margaret, neglect her duty, but she's definitely more selfish, I think, in a lot of ways. And so I think that really represents a change in her character, or a reassertion of who she is, maybe even to herself. She just dropped everything. She didn't even think about the fact that she's in her wedding dress, that he can't move because he's in this stupid full body cast. She just pieces out and leaves him to go take care of wounded.
Yeah, that's a redeeming quality, I think.
Which then comes back, too, because you get that great shot of her coming in on Potter's arm in her wedding dress, and there's, the light. She's, beautifully backlit, which then comes back in season 8. So, spoilers for the next episode.
This might be a little too much trivia, but sometimes the character reminds me of my grandmother, which if you'd known my grandmother, you'd be like, holy crap. My grandmother's no longer with us, but there's a pattern to Hot Lips and how she reacts to things that's very reminiscent of my grandmother.
You have a specific story to tell?
No, not that I can think of right now. I'm already struggling with people's names. Now you want me to this is just a very strong impression that I have when I watch the show sometimes. I'm like, oh, this would be my father's mother.
My crazy child brain, and maybe because they're from the same era-ish, always thought Margaret and Miss Piggy were similar character types.
Well, one of my favorite episodes of The Muppet Show is the Loretta Swit episode.
Yeah.
No.
No?
Sarah doesn't agree. They're both two strong female characters.
With blonde hair.
I was going to say that similar blonde hair.
Well, in the Muppet Show episode, Miss Piggy gets upset that she's trying to take over her part. And actually, when Miss Piggy decides, I'm done with the show, Loretta Swit comes in. It's like, yes, I will gladly take over Miss Piggy's part in Pigs in Space. So actually, Nick, that comparison is apt.
Someday we'll cover the Muppet Show on CPU. And
Please, we need to do a Muppet Show episode on CPU.
Well, if you want, my children will cover the new Muppet Babies series. They are all...
I'd be down for the Muppets.
Tag them in. They love it.
All right, before we diverge farther off the rails,
Oh.
we basically, my last couple of points, we covered fairly well the tonal shift in these seasons with the different writers and producers. I don't know if anyone else had anything more to say about that, but we kind of started with that naturally. Because we basically, by the time season 5 ends, we don't have any of the original comedic foundation that the show began with.
You're talking behind the scenes.
Behind the scenes, yes. So a lot of people focus on the cast change being like why the show is different, but a lot of things change behind the scenes. Like I said, it's complete. There's not a single person left over behind the scenes from the original.
And you're talking about the switch from Burt Metcalf to Larry Gelbart, or Larry Gelbart to Burt Metcalf. Is that how it goes?
The second one.
The second one, yeah. Larry Gelbart was one of the comic voices of the first few seasons, and then he leaves.
He also co-created the show, so...
Yeah, and Gene Reynolds departed at the conclusion of season 5, and then...
Hy Averback wrote, like, a good chunk of seasons, like, 2 and 3, and that was the end for him as well. So it was nice to get a lot of different voices. I mean, those first 3 seasons had a pretty limited number of writers and directors. In 4 through 7, you get a lot of different voices all of a sudden, which I think helps a lot.
It helps, and one of the things they did, Elle and Alda being a part of this team, it was they went to Korea to like learn more about the culture and integrate that more into storytelling.
Like I said,
on the first episode, how Larry Gelbart was the book writer for A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum? Or did I not sneak that in?
I don't think we mentioned that, no.
Now you know that he wrote the book for that amazing Sondheim musical. So you're welcome.
I mean, I believe Larry Gelbart is a fairly big name in television and the entertainment. Now, you mentioned the book writer of Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum. So, I mean, it is kind of a big deal to lose him or to have him walk away from a show like MASH, which was one of the most popular shows on TV at the time.
And of course, we should mention that Sarah is just a crowning musical theater nerd. So why would
big, huge nerd. But
I would not have known that. But just to go back to what I said, probably at the top of the recording. If this hadn't happened, if these changeovers hadn't happened, I don't think MASH would have lasted 11 seasons. It kind of breathed new life into the show. And in some ways it felt like a different show, but in some ways it also maintained continuity and was a Sunday night staple. So
yeah, I would agree with that. There's a chance it might have kept chugging along, but I don't think it would have had the longevity, rewatchability, and I mean, none of us talking about it today was watching them as they aired.
Right.
So even if they did keep going and it got stale, it might have had enough viewership. But
it had millions of viewers, tens of millions of viewers, because back then there was only 3 channels. So people watched MASH.
It is interesting to know. I'm looking at Larry Gelbart's IMDb page right now because I was curious to know exactly what his place in the entertainment history is, and he wrote on the Sid Caesar show, which is a big deal in the 50s because that was where Mel Brooks and the recently departed Carl Reiner and all got their start and were big. So I mean, like, to be a writer on that show was basically they almost invented comedy for the second half of the 20th, for like the mid part of the 20th century.
They did a really good job of adapting vaudevillian things to television. And
right.
All right. Any last things to mention about seasons 4 through 7 of the show, other than it's not bingeable or it's not as bingeable as we're used to?
Only thing I can say is good riddance, Frank Burns.
Yes, I'm okay with that.
They give him a send-off, but it just includes Ferret Face in there.
I was going to say, it's basically him like going crazy or something like that and saying like, you can't go back.
Yeah, off screen he goes insane.
But it all works out for him. He ends up like the head of surgery at some, right? Doesn't he?
Yeah, he ends up, I mean, he goes crazy basically, but he does essentially have...
He gets transferred stateside to like a veterans hospital.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he's in like Indiana, right? Isn't it like an Indiana VA hospital?
Yeah, so he gets to go not only home, but home.
So it all works out for old Ferret Face. All right, I think we've sufficiently covered seasons 4 through 7 of MASH. So with that being said, it's time for Kylie to say her spiel.
Which goes like this. I'd like to thank Sarah, Nick, Jen, Josh, Mary, and Michael for joining me and joining Nick because he moderated. Thanks for moderating, Nick. Seasons
You're
4.
welcome.
Okay, seasons 4 through 7 of MASH, but don't turn that dial just yet. Not only do we have another episode in this MASH series coming along, we also have some credits. Couch Potatoes Unite! Exclamation point was produced by Back Pocket Productions, run by yours truly, the Chief Couch Potato, which is really another way of saying executively produced by me, Kylie Piette. My associate producers are Krista Pennington and Selene Rezmer. I edit this podcast, and our logo is by Rebecca Wallace. Our marketing graphic artist is Krista. Our theme song was written by Sarah Milbratz and sung by Sarah, Amy McDaniel, and Kels Rezmer. Kels played the keyboard, Ian McDonough played the bass, Christian Somerville played the guitar, and the whole shebang was engineered by Kyle Aspinall and Christian. We hail from Grand Rapids, Michigan. Please, if you like what you hear, take the time to rate us, give us stars, provide comments, or review us wherever you get your podcasts. Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, CastBox, and Amazon are just a few of the places you can find us, but we're also on YouTube. We have our website, and we're now on Patreon at patreon.com/couchpotatoesunite. If you really love us, pledge your support by becoming one of our United Couch Potatoes as we grow our little sofa-populated corner of the world. Otherwise, feel free to tell us how we're doing, what we should add, subtract, keep, or toss. You know how it goes. And if you have suggestions for shows we might consider, contact us at our website where we have a guest book, by email at couchpotatoesunitepodcast@gmail.com, our Facebook, our Twitter at CPU Podcast, our Instagram at Couch Potatoes Unite, our Patreon, or wherever you get your podcasts. Though, of course, we add new and old shows to chat about around the water cooler all the time, and always have new episodes coming down the pipe. Just listen to our intros. If you miss old episodes or want to know in general what shows we cover, just search for us. Find us wherever you do searchable things on the internet. Don't forget that exclamation point, or contact us via our website, our email, our social media accounts, and our Patreon to stay up on all the new events and episodes by our humble little podcast, Couch Potatoes Unite! Exclamation point. Until the next time, all available seasons of MASH are available to stream on Hulu, which houses a large proportion of the 20th Century Fox library. In the meantime, our MASH panel will next reconvene sometime in the very near future to discuss seasons 8 through 11, including the much-touted series finale. As always, keep a weathered eye to CPU for all of the details. In the meantime, until next time, until next episode, new episodes are published every Wednesday. Keep listening, keep watching, stay tuned!
Bye.
Bye-bye.